Hey guys, it's Ali here. I want to make a video today on a very simple concept and a very simple understanding that I've come to over time. And I talk about it all the time with my friends and my family, but I realize I haven't made a video on it here. And really is the explanation of why we're facing so many problems today in terms of our health as humans. And so I want you to start with, just think about where we're at right now as humanity. We have undergone incredible technological progress. We have undergone incredible medical and scientific advancements, right? Infectious diseases, which have been killing humans for thousands of years before, not a problem, right? We got vaccines, we got antibiotics, child mortality has gone really down. On top of that, we have unprecedented access to healthcare, most of us here in the West. We have unprecedented access to resources and opportunities, most of us here, right? We have the ability to travel over the world. We have the ability to create our own jobs. We can connect with anyone, pretty much anyone on this planet. Like madness, absolute madness. And so what you would think, right, at this point is that we would be approaching the point where humans are starting to have a really phenomenal life experience. The humans are happier than before, they're more fulfilled than before, they can pursue their dreams, they can really make something like wow with their lives. But what is happening is that depression's on the rise, anxiety and other mental health disorders on the rise. We are massively overweight. There are countries where 50% of people are obese. Childhood diabetes and other problems are going up. Autoimmune disorders are going up. And I think it's predicted that 1 out of 3 or 4 people will get cancer in their lifetime. And for the first time in history, at least in the US, it's predicted that a current generation will live shorter than their parents. Mad. So, how did we find ourselves here? I've been asking myself this question for a very long time. I went to study neuroscience because I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to figure out specifically how is it that our nervous system and mind goes, astray and starts causing sort of problems like depression, anxiety, and so on. But also more and more that started becoming into like, why are we so miserable? Why are we so sick, right? We can access any sort of supplements. We have so much information. There are so many scientific studies. Why are we doing so poorly? So science didn't give me answers. Neuroscience didn't give me any answers. Biology didn't give me any answers. Actually, it made me more confused, if anything. Because I was like, we know so much. Why is nothing working? And then I started studying Ayurveda, and I was like, oh my God, okay. Now I understand a little bit more. And so I want to show today the basic premise behind why we're having so many issues today. I'm going to make it very simple. I'll try to keep it short, but no promises on that one. So, when you think about a human being, right, like I am, like you are, a lot of the time we tend to view ourselves as, an individual. We have our body and we're like, oh, we have full control over our bodies and all of that. And sure, of course, you have autonomy over what you do with your body. But we keep forgetting that your body is not just, some sort of cells that adopt a certain form dictated by your DNA, although that certainly is a part. But your body is a product of millions of years of evolution. Okay, so, we had our Big Bang right here, and then planets emerged and stars emerged, and eventually, our wonderful planet Earth emerged, which I'm not going to make it green and yellow. You all know what this is. Okay, this does not look like the Earth, but bear with me. And then here eventually, somehow we got to life. Yeah. And, we got a ton of things. We got our bacteria and we got our algae, and eventually we got to some mammals, right? And we got some plants and we got some fungi Actually, here would be better just to say animals, really, if we're doing kingdoms. And then animals, here we have insects, and we have reptiles, and eventually, not for real, we get our mammals, right? And somewhere along this evolutionary tree, we get to a human. Great, so this is where we're at now. And this keeps going, right? Evolution keeps happening. It's happening as we speak. It's never an ending story. Life is looking for better ways to design new beings that will survive better in the environment. Okay, so we got our human. And so, this we're talking like from here, right, to here, we're talking 13.7 billion. Did I spell this right? I think I did. Okay, years. So this is how long evolution's been going on, right? Evolution of life as we know it, of consciousness, if you want. But drop that if it doesn't, work for you, the word consciousness. So, for 13.7 billion years, all of life and all of our ancestors have been evolving together, following the same cycles of life, cycles of nature. And of course, at the beginning, with all the, volcanoes and formation of life and water and all of that, things have been a bit messy. But eventually, what happened was that a certain sort of environment stabilized on this earth. And that's been out for a pretty long time. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that our environment followed a specific order. Nature follows specific order. Okay, so I'm going to put order here. And what I mean by orders really is certain cycles. The life of our planet follows a cyclical it has a cyclical nature to it. Let's think about it. Cycles that occur in a day. Every day the sun rises and the sun sets, and the moon rises and the moon sets. In the morning, as the sun rises, the temperature rises and goes down. Humidity changes throughout the day. In certain parts of the world, you will have a cyclical nature of the day where every day, around midday, around noon, you will get rain, right? And that happens every single day. There's order to it. On a grander scale, the cyclical nature can be seasons. So for example, here where I'm in Central Europe, we get, right now it's summer, right? It's going to be followed by fall. It's going to be followed by winter. It's going to be followed by spring. There's a predictable, constant pattern to it. In other parts of the world, you may have rainy season and then dry season. You will get hurricanes, you will get monsoons. Tides are cyclical, right? All of these things follow a repetitive sort of pattern. Because they're cyclical and can be predicted, life co-evolved with that. And life evolved with the cycles. How can you see that? Well, plants follow these cycles. You get sprouting in spring, abundance in summer. Some of the harvest will be done in early fall or even later fall, depending on the plant, right? And then follows normally death, or at least sleep over winter. Animals follow a similar sort of pattern. A lot of animals will give birth to their young in spring. And they will have thinner coats in summer than they will in winter. Even their diet changes, right? Deer or goats, if you've ever observed them, they will feed on bark in winter, but in spring they will feed on fresh grass. And similarly in the summer, they also won't eat bark because they don't have to. For the longest time, we have followed the same sort of patterns. We have followed these cycles, right? We had no choice. We woke up around the sunrise and we went to bed soon after the sun's gone down. Because there was no Netflix, there was no TV. What were you going to do? The only thing you had was fire, right? There's only that many things you can do. We ate seasonal foods. We ate a lot of leafy greens in spring when they were available, and we ate bitter roots then. And then in summer, when there was an abundance of everything, we ate fruits, and we ate, wild vegetables, whatever was around there. And, we were eating hundreds and hundreds of different species. And then in fall, we would pick nuts and we would save them for winter. And we would save grains and nuts and these energy-dense foods for winter. So it would last until next spring, because in winter, there's not a lot of food. You can get some, but not that much. So we naturally follow the cycles for hundreds of thousands of years. And as evolution tends to do, is that it makes sure that the body can evolve with that. So we have our human here, right? And please forgive my drawing. Our human, oh my goodness. Our human's body here, it's not too bad this time. There we go. Our human's body evolved together with these cycles. And in our body we have our lungs, right, that are here, and then we'll have our stomach, and then we'll have our digestive system, right, it goes around here, and we will have our liver around here, and kidneys, and so on. And then of course we have our nervous system, right, that's everywhere in the body. And all of these systems in the body co-evolve with these cycles, meaning they are regulated by them. To give you an example of that, one of the strongest stimuli for a human being is light. Light activates your pineal gland, which is roughly in the center of your brain. And your pineal gland is responsible for secretion of melatonin, which is a hormone that promotes sleep. And because hormones affect all the physiology in your body, this one simple thing, light, entrains your whole circadian rhythm, which means that the entire rhythm of your body is dependent on it. And if you mess up with that rhythm, none of the tissues in your body can function properly. Every single cell of your body is entrained to light, and it responds best, which is what science has shown now, it responds best to the light of rising and setting sun. So if you're not exposed to the light when the sun is rising, your circadian rhythm will be off, and everything else in your body. Another thing is foods, right? We used to eat seasonal foods, and there's a good reason for that. For example, in spring, eating bitter foods cleanses your system. After a long winter when there was less movement, people slept more, and we ate heavier foods because we needed heavier foods to have a protective layer to protect us from the elements, from the cold. Then in spring, people moved more. They started, spending more calories, burning more calories. They were eating lighter foods because heavier foods were no longer available because you've eaten all of them over the long cold winter. So your body lightened up, and come summer was the time when you did the most work anyways, because there was so much to do, right? If you're working on a farm, or before, you could go hunt, you could pick all of the different medicinal plants and plants for food, and so on. Do we still do that anymore? So this is really some food for thought here. And I want to address now just a couple of different things that have changed in the recent, most of them really in the past 200 years, not more than that, since Industrial Revolution. And I want to give you just a couple of areas in which these things changed that have affected our health and well-being most. So I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't want to squat to be able to drop the bottom part of my board. So let's think about what are some of the basic activities that are necessary for our health. So I'm just gonna put them here. We're gonna have sleep. We're gonna have food. We are going to have levels of stimulation for our nervous system. So I'm going to put nervous system stimulation. I am going to put time outside. And I'm going to put exercise. And this is not too nice, is it? I'm gonna draw this. I don't know if this is gonna work. I hope this is gonna work. I think I may have put them a bit too close. But we'll just think about it together. And the last thing I'm gonna put is really time in silence. And I'm gonna put silence and calm. Yeah, and we're just gonna think about that. And so we're going to think about how this was, you know, let's say 100,000 years ago. And we're going to think about how this is today. And, you know, the reason why 100,000 years ago is relevant is because evolution doesn't happen that fast. Like, evolution really doesn't happen fast, right? If we think about the whole span of 13.7 billion years, like 100,000 years is really not a lot. And our bodies are really very similar to how they were back then. So when we're thinking about our ancestors, 100,000 years ago is actually super relevant to us in terms of how our physiology functions. So that was smart. All right, I think we'll need another. There we go. So, today. So, let's think about sleep. 100,000 years ago, there was no electricity. The only thing that people had was fire. And, you know, of course, we can't know for sure how people lived back then, but if we look at any pre-industrial societies that still exist today, what we can see is a classical pattern, which is that people wake up about an hour before sunrise and go to bed about 1 to 2 hours afterwards. Changes throughout the seasons, but that's a general pattern. And this pattern is conserved amongst all of the pre-industrial societies, regardless of where in the world they live. There are small differences, but it's very consistent. So I'm going to say here, you know, you get up with the sun and you go to bed when the sun goes down, so with the moon. What's happening today? How many of you get up with the sun? How many of you go to bed about 1 to 2 hours afterwards? We got electricity, right? And what you see is a ton of people having lights on way after the sun's gone down. Terrible, terrible. Remember I talked about melatonin? Released from your pineal gland? It's called hormone of darkness because it needs darkness to be released. Light inhibits it. Meaning if you have overhead lights on after the sun's gone down, you don't get your melatonin. Don't get melatonin, you can't sleep well. Hello insomnia, hello poor quality sleep, hello eventually nervous system and immune system breakdown. So we got electricity, we got TV, we got Netflix, right? We have social media, we have screens, etc. There's more. Food. Said before, seasonal eating. How many of you here eat in season? How many of you eat plants from your local environment? How many of you eat something like thistle and dandelions and lamb's quarters and purslane and plantain and so on? All the edible plants that grow probably in your backyard. And I'm willing to bet that you probably didn't even recognize the names of half of these plants, right? It's not your fault, but it's a reality, right? We eat on average, I don't know, I think an average person eats about like 15 to 20 different plant species. And Native Americans ate something like in 2,000, some crazy number if you look at indigenous peoples. Okay, how many of you eat tropical fruits in the middle of winter? How many of you have a diet that stays pretty much the same all year round? Did you eat the same food in spring as you eat in fall, as you eat in high summer and winter? How many people are here who eat heavy heating foods like red meat in peak summer? I'm in Germany, like it's absolute unbelievable catastrophe. You see people 30 degrees outside with huge beer, right? Mass, anyone who's from Germany, Munich specifically. And they will get like a Schweinhax, pork with it. Middle of summer, holy no, right? Like no. It's a problem. It's a problem. And then we're like, why are we fat? Don't know. So, anything from anywhere, anytime. No seasonal eating. Foods inappropriate for body type, inappropriate for the amount of activity, inappropriate for the time of the year. Nervous system stimulation. Okay, let's think about how it was 100,000 years ago, right? So what do I mean by nervous system stimulation? Everything that affects your senses stimulates your nervous system. So that from conversations, especially emotionally charged conversations, light, especially flickering lights, screens, anyone, loud noises, fast moving objects, just the amount of content that you have to process. So think the amount of advertisement you see going down the road. Think about the amount of sounds you have to process, sights, smells, any experience that you have, your nervous system needs to process. How was that 100,000 years ago? How many conversations were people having daily? How many people did they talk with? How many screens were they exposed to? How many advertisements did they see walking down the road? How much loud noise was there? Cars passing by super fast. We're now driving in fast vehicles. That's stimulating to your nervous system. That's something your body wasn't evolved to do. So nervous system stimulation, I'm just going to put a little, and I'm going to put here, tons, right? Think about it. Just think about how many things are here. Every time you scroll, instant gratification, constantly, just hits, right? Dopamine. Over time, you end up with depletion. You end up with nervous system breakdown. That leads to immune system breakdown. Time outdoors. Tons, right? People relied on nature. Even until recently, when people still worked on the farms, you were outside all the time. You were breathing fresh air. You were getting a ton of sunlight. You were moving around all the time. You were in touch with the plants. You were in touch with the animals. You were exposed to all of these other types of life, right? You were interacting with them. Now, we're inside like 90% of the time, sometimes more. And then maybe people who actually, take time to at least go outside for an hour a day. Exercise. When people had to physically work, they were exercising all the time. It wasn't exercise, it was just movement, right? It was work. And we were performing all of these different movements we don't do anymore, right? Like think about it, you had to squat down and pick something up, and then you had to put something overhead, right? And you walked around carrying heavy stuff, and you had to chase the animals around the farm, and you had to tend to the garden, and you were doing all of these different movements most people can't even do nowadays. How many people can squat? You know what's one of the biggest causes of death in the Western world? When people fall down and they can't pick themselves back up, they can't get up from the floor because we don't have the musculature to get ourselves up from a seated position when we get older. That's one of the biggest issues and biggest fears of older people, which is, by the way, not a problem in somewhere like the Philippines where you sleep on the floor still a lot of the time. Interesting, isn't it? So, point being, get rid of your bed. So, exercise, again, tons, right? There was just movement all the time and little to really none for some people, right? Some people can't even deal with a walk. And silence and calm, this really goes together with nervous system stimulation here. As I said, everything you take in, your body needs to process. And if you're exposed to a lot of conversations, a lot of stimulations, a lot of music, a lot of sounds, a lot of screens, means you need way more time when nothing is coming in for all of that to process. That can be sitting in silence, meditation, just being outside and watching the clouds go by. There was probably a lot of sky gazing happening 100,000 years ago. There were huge periods of time when not much was happening. What about today? So, tons, little. So guys, this is what our bodies evolved with. This is what we're doing today. And by bodies, I'm not just talking your physical body. I'm not talking your weight. I'm not talking just cardiovascular system. Your body is your physical body, like your fleshy parts, but it's also your nervous system, which is your mind, and it's your emotional system, which is connected to your mental faculty as well. All of these things are connected. When you start breaking down when you start messing with your circadian rhythm, your entire endocrine system and hormonal system will break down. Your nervous system will start breaking down. Your nervous system starts breaking down, starts normally with anxiety, which we oftentimes now see with people goes into depression. And then afterwards, of course, you have your nervous system messed up, your immune system will start breaking down. We start seeing autoimmune diseases on the rise, especially problematic in women. Why? Because our hormonal systems are more sensitive, because we're way more cyclical than even men are, and the lifestyle we have is hugely coming from linear way of thinking, patriarchal way of thinking, masculine way of thinking, which affects women a lot more even than it affects men, because we flow also with the cycles of the moon, right? We have periods, 28 days. But this applies to everyone. This is way transcendent just women being affected. We now see this on a really grand scale. So, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. But what is wonderful about this is actually that it's really so simple. It is so simple. If you start aligning with the cycles of nature, with the cycles of life, you are doing yourself the biggest favor you can in terms of your health. You will start seeing differences like you will not with any medical drugs, with any other intervention. I have seen phenomenal changes happen to people when they started changing their habits to be in line with cycles of nature. It doesn't have to be 100% of the time, but getting them right about 80% of the time is sufficient to reverse sometimes lifelong disorders. So this is my little video on why we're so screwed up as a society right now, why we struggle so much with so many health disorders. I hope this was educational. I hope it makes sense. I hope it's intuitive. When I learned that, I was like, hallelujah. Why has no one Why has no one told me that before? Why does no one talk about this? Why are there no men, like health professionals out there that are like, oh yeah, like we just like, well, our entire life is completely out of line with what we evolved to be doing. But you know, for the same reason, right? They don't know it. No one teaches us that. So this is the big picture perspective, bird's eye perspective of why things are the way they are. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you're interested to go deeper, if you're interested in learning more with me and experimenting with these things, I have a habit course. I have 5 phenomenal people in there. I'm going to be recruiting soon more. And there we do exactly this. We align our lives with the cycles of nature. And God be my witness, if you do that, your life will never be the same again. And you will you will certainly experience the levels of thrive and the levels of just connectivity with yourself that you probably can't even imagine. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you very soon. Thank you.